Hi, this is Simon Canlish and welcome to another marvelous video. Batman's Rogue Gallery is made up of an army of villains, and the Victim Syndicate is a group of criminals who are unarguably one of Batman's most underrated enemies. While most of Batman's villains had reasons for going against the Dark Knight, the Victim Syndicate was made up of 5 members who had ended up as collateral damage during the fights between other criminals and Batman. After suffering damages and injuries, these members started blaming Batman for their condition and devoted their life to stirring up trouble for the entire Bat family. Today we'll explore the origins of the Victim Syndicate and tell you everything there is to know about this underrated enemy of the Bat family. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, then please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. The first comic book appearance was eventful. The Victim Syndicate was first introduced in Detective Comics, Volume 1, Issue 943. That was written by James Tynion. This issue was based in the aftermath of Tim Drake's death, wherein Batman and his Bat family struggled to come to terms with the unfortunate demise. The Bat family includes Batwoman, Clayface, and the 2 Batgirls, Cassandra Cain, Cass, and Stephanie Brown, Steph. As the story moves forward, Bruce Wayne and Kate Kane get ready to attend a gala hosted by Luke Fox. Various other characters such as Cass, Steph, as well as Basil Karlo, aka Clayface, and Harper Fox show up at the gala's red carpet, and they make their way inside the mansion when an explosion catches their eyes. A team of villains who we know as the Victim Syndicate appear at the scene and announce that they have a message for the greatest villain in the city. They declare that they are sending a message to Batman and everyone who has supported his reign of terror. As the issue ends, First Victim steps forward and blames Batman for destroying their lives. The team then introduces themselves as the Victim Syndicate and declares they are here to return the favor and ruin their lives. In the next issue, titled The Victim Syndicate Part 2, Payback, the newly introduced gang wreaks havoc at the gala while Cass, Steph, Clayface, and the others sneak into the mansion's parking lot to have a look at Luke Fox's flying car. However, they are soon summoned back to the gala by Batwoman, who orders them to change into their uniforms and assist her in defusing the situation. This issue also introduces Luke Fox as the second Batwing, and the entire Bat family changes into their suits and shows up in the main hall. In the meantime, detectives Renee Montoya and Harvey Bullock try to fight off the Victim Syndicate. Renee especially approaches the team of villains and even aims a gun at the first victim. She asks them to surrender, but the first victim replies that the Syndicate is not here to fight with anyone except Batman. While the two of them engage in conversation, the rest of the Victim Syndicates, including Madame Crow, Mr. Noxious, Mudface, and Mute, stand behind the first victim and prepare to attack. When Batman finally shows up and launches an attack on them, the first victim dodges him and boasts about spending the last 7 years designing a suit that will withstand Batman's attacks. Batman ensures that everyone around him is safe and even asks his Batwing to clear the entire field, and the whole Bat family appears by Batman's side as he faces the Victim Syndicate. Batman asks them who they are, and the first victim seems disappointed that Batman does not even recognize them. The Victim Syndicate finally launches an attack on the Bat family, and Mr. Noxious targets the vigilante Batgirl named Steph, who also goes by the name Spoiler. While Mr. Noxious' attack leaves Stephanie weakened, First Victim assures that Steph will survive the attack. Another member of the Syndicate, Mute, uses his powers to silence everyone at the scene, while First Victim continues to speak and tells Batman that he is responsible for the Mute's current state. The first victim then broadcasts a message to the citizens of Gotham and tries to turn them against Batman by blaming him for all the terrible things that have happened to them. When Batman is finally allowed to speak, the vigilante reveals that Batwing had to cut the feed to their broadcast a while back, and that he also found a weakness in the first victim's suit design. Batman punches the first victim while the rest of the Bat family and the Victim Syndicate break into a fight. Mr. Noxious and Madame Crow fight against Batwoman and Detective Renee, while Mudface corners Detective Harper and Clayface, who are trying to get Steph to safety. We also learn that Clayface played a role in disfiguring Mudface's features, and that her real name is Glory. While Clayface tries to reason with Mudface by saying that he never intended to hurt her, she retaliates by saying that it's too late for this, since he has already hurt her. As the scene shifts to Batman and First Victim, we learn that the first victim was the first innocent person whose life was ruined by Batman, while the two two engage in conversation, Madame Crow shows up to help the first victim defeat Batman. In the meantime, Batwing appears at the scene and tells the victim Syndicate to surrender themselves, since they have been cornered by armed forces. However, the victim Syndicate refuses to step down, and Madame Crow even releases an anti-fear toxin that will cause the armed officers to lose their sense of fear and shoot at everybody in their path. As chaos breaks loose, the Bat family tries to bring the situation under control and avoid any deaths. The victim Syndicate disappears from the scene in the meantime, and the Bat family takes a sigh of relief as they consider this a win on their part. However, while Steph still recovers at the hospital, Dr. Leslie Tompkins wants Batman to avoid throwing young children into dangerous situations. As the issue ends, the first victim breaks into Steph's room for a little chat while she watches in fear. In the next issue, titled The Victim Syndicate Unforgiven, Batman learns about the first victim's visit to Steph's room, and he soon visits Steph and asks her all about it. While Steph refuses to divulge the details of the conversation, she tells him that the first victim apologized for hurting her and said they never intended for anyone to get hurt amid the chaos. While Batman does not believe Steph's words, he leaves and soon visits Batwoman. The two talk about their plans for when the victim Syndicate strikes again, and Batman also proposes that the entire team should meet Dr. Leslie Tompkins for a psychological evaluation. While Batman tries to figure out the first victim's true identity, Clayface meets Dr. Tompkins and tells her everything he remembers about Mudface. Basil tells her that his memories are still a little bit fuzzy, but he remembers that Glory was just a fan of his movies and that she only wanted to talk to him about his roles and the other stars he worked with. When Basil got into the accident that disfigured his face, Glory reached out to him and tried to stop him from hurting himself. However, he had lost control and drowned her in the same chemicals that turned him into Clayface. He then stops talking and looks at Dr. Tompkins and even transforms into Clayface in front of her eyes. He then shows her an album Mudface handed him at the gala and wonders why Batman wants someone like him on his team. As the story progresses, Steph meets with Dr. Tompkins, while Batwoman gets into an argument with Luke Fox, as she thinks he is not worthy enough to be on their team. In the meantime, the victim Syndicate targets Dr. Tompkins' free clinic and faces John Paul Valley. Harper also arrives at the clinic to talk to John Paul about Steph and gets caught amid the chaos. While Steph still grieves Tim Drake's death and blames Batman for it, the two set their differences aside and head to the clinic to fight the victim Syndicate. The next issue begins with a flashback wherein Batman recollects his conversation with Tim Drake while he heads to the free clinic in the present day. As he reaches the clinic to fight the victim Syndicate, Batman faces the first victim and says that he knows that the victim Syndicate has been hurt by his actions and that he can do better and ensure no one else gets hurt. However, the first victim retaliates by saying that this will only end with blood on Batman's hands. While Batman fights with the first victim, Steph uses an AI program that allows her to converse with Tim Drake. While the scene shifts to the hospital, Clayface deals with Mudface and even confesses that he feels sorry for her before cornering her and pushing her to the ground. The Bat family also uses a blocker to block Madame Crow from using her anti-fear toxin again, while Batwoman and Batman team up to deal with Mr. Noxious. In the meantime, Mute tries to sneak upon Harper, who is trying to get the patients to safety. Mute gets cornered by another member of the Bat family, who inserts an earpiece that relays Mute's wife's death at the hands of the Joker. While Mute falls to the ground and recollects a painful memory, the rest of them get to safety. As the scene shifts to the first victim and Batman, the vigilante successfully defeats his opponent when a surprise member of the victim Syndicate makes an appearance. To everyone's surprise, Stephanie, aka Spoiler, sides with the victim Syndicate and even releases a high-frequency sound that hurts the entire Bat family. In the next comic, titled The Victim Syndicate Finale, The Brave One, Batwoman tries to reason with Steph, but her efforts go in vain. Steph asks them to address her as Spoiler and even asks Batwing not to try to pull any tricks with their suits, since she played a role in creating them and can easily counter his plans. Cass tries to reason with Steph, who does not hesitate to attack her friend with the high-tech weapons at her disposal. Steph also manages to defeat Batwoman and Clayface before finally facing Batman. She knows that she does not stand a chance against Batman, and she instead negotiates a deal with him. She asks Batman to step down as a vigilante and retire, or she will publicly release every bit of information stored in the Bat computer. While the first victim tries to strike a deal with the spoiler, she declares that she is not here to help them and that they were responsible for almost killing her during their first encounter. The first victim then blames Batman for all the chaos around them, and the vigilante finally apologizes for all his actions and says that he has failed everyone. He further addresses the victim syndicate and asks them to give him a chance to save them. Spoiler gives Batman an ultimatum and asks him to retire right now, and Batman retaliates by asking her if that would solve anything. She replies by stating that Tim would have been alive if not for Batman, and Batman expresses his regret over his death. Eventually, the Bat family tries to speak some sense into Spoiler, but she refuses to cooperate and leaves after declaring them as her rivals. While she leaves, the Bat family places the victim syndicate under arrest, and they soon end up at Arkham Asylum. 3 days later, Basil visits Mudface at the asylum and has a hearty conversation, wherein he reveals that they are having difficulty keeping Mr. Noxious, Mute, and Madame Crow under control. He also offers to visit Mudface weekly and gives her the opinion of removing him from her visitations list if she does not wish to see him. As the scene shifts to Batman and Batwoman, the two observe Mute from outside his cell and discuss whether Spoiler might even come back to their side. They also realize that there is a good chance that they will never uncover the first victim's true identity, and the leader of the victim syndicate is also nowhere to be seen in Arkham. As the scene shifts to Spoiler, we learn that she never intended to disclose any information to the public, but she also decides to part ways with the Bat family. The comic ends with a cliffhanger where we learn that Tim Drake was alive all this while and that he intends to make a comeback soon. The victim syndicate later appeared in Detective Comics after a few issues, number 969, in an issue titled Fall of the Batman, Part 1. The comic begins with Spoiler paying a visit to Arkham Asylum, where she meets up with Lonnie Machin, aka Anarchy. She discusses how the mayor thinks that the city does not need a new police force since they have the Bat family to protect Gotham, while Lonnie tries to convince her to join the victim syndicate. While Spoiler refuses his offer, he gives her an address and asks her to visit the place in a few weeks and then make a decision. While Spoiler leaves Arkham, she runs into Clayface, who tries to inform her that Tim Drake is alive and back again. While Spoiler rushes out without hearing Clayface's message, she soon reunites with Tim, aka Red Robin, and they share an emotional moment. As the story skips 3 weeks later, the Bat family deals with Tim's return, while Batman visits Mayor Akins, who has some concerns about the involvement of a former criminal, Clayface, in the Bat family. In a different part of the city, Anarchy reports his conversation with Spoiler to his boss, who is then revealed to be the first victim. Anarchy states that Spoiler was almost ready to join their syndicate, but Red Robin's return changed her mind. The first victim does not seem too bothered about this and instead states that their plan to bring about the downfall of the Bat family is already in motion. As this issue ends, we learn that the entire victim syndicate, including the first victim, Madame Crow, Mudface, Mr. Noxious, and the Mute, have managed to break out of Arkham. They come together and declare that the Bat family will finally know how it feels to be the victim. In the next issue, number 970, Steph and Tim Drake face a lot of issues in their relationship due to the secrets they've kept from each other. While Steph decides to leave after fighting with Tim, the latter checks Arkham's footage to see what Anarchy is up to. He is shocked to see that the entire asylum cell is empty and that Anarchy is nowhere to be seen. In the meantime, Clayface meets with Dr. Victoria October, who tells him she is close to preparing a cure for his condition. She assures him that he will soon return to his former self as the movie star Basil Carlo, but Clayface has doubts about his true self. He decides to visit Mudface, who is supposedly free from Arkham, but has somehow managed to return to the asylum to meet with Clayface. Since Clayface blames himself for Mudface's current condition, he proposes that she can use the cure developed by Dr. Victoria to return to her usual self before him. However, Mudface refuses to cooperate with him and states that she prefers her current self, since it serves as a reminder of Clayface's mistakes. She says that people will remember that Clayface is a monster whenever they look at her. Mudface further reveals that they had sent out information about how Clayface is a wanted criminal working alongside Batman to various news agencies, who will soon broadcast this information to the public. While Clayface shockingly processes this information, two men walk into the room and taser him before taking him away. As the issue ends, the victim syndicate's plan finally gets into motion as they start changing the public's opinion of Batman by leaking information about criminals on his team and how he cannot be trusted. end. The next issue begins with the Victim Syndicate taking over Arkham Asylum, while a young journalist visits the place to gain information about them. She talks to the first victim and then confirms if the Victim Syndicate was responsible for killing the police officers, when Mr. Noxious interrupts her and declares that he was responsible for killing the officers. As the story progresses, the first victim states that Arkham Asylum was supposed to be a place of healing and that it was been ruined due to Batman. While talking to the young reporter, the first victim also points out that they are only trying to show Batman's true intentions to the citizens of Gotham and that they want to help the city. The victim also points out that Batman's alliance with a criminal such as Clayface only proves that he does not care about the citizens of Gotham, while the reporter listens intently. She then wonders what she can do in this situation when the first victim introduces her to Mudface and asks her to share how her life was ruined due to a crossfire between Batman and Clayface. While various news outlets begin reporting these stories, Batman gathers with the rest of the Bat family as they bring Red Robin up to speed on everything that has happened between them and the Victim Syndicate. Batman states that the first victim wants him to reveal his true identity and then step down as Batman, and they also learn that Anarchy had been working alongside the Victim Syndicate to convince the common public to side with them. They even declared a Victims' Day, and hundreds of common people dressed up as the victims and protest on the streets of Gotham. While Cass gets restless and points out that Clayface needs their help, Mayor Atkins calls Batman and asks him to come to Arkham all alone. The mayor further tells Batman that he must work alongside Jim Gordon to defuse the situation and that they need to disband the Bat family and ensure that Clayface remains under arrest even after the entire situation settles down. Batman orders the Bat family to show up at the Victim Day marches separately and take care of the situation while he heads to Arkham alone. While Batman arrives outside Arkham and meets with Jim Gordon, Clayface tries to convince Mudface to return his bracelet. He reasons with her and tells her that they do not wish to see what will become of him if he does not get his bracelet back, and Mudface replies by stating that they intend to expose his true nature to the world after all. Outside Arkham, Inspector Gordon tells Batman that the Syndicate intends to release the dangerous criminals from their cells until Batman finally walks inside and surrenders himself. Batman ends up meeting Anarchy at the gates of Arkham, who then leads him inside the asylum where the Victim Syndicate has gathered to greet Batman. The vigilante activates a code that causes Arkham to go into a lockdown when the first victim reveals that Batman will now have to fight and defeat hundreds of people inside the asylum. The victim also asks Batman if he is ready to fight so many of them, and the vigilante prepares to fight his opponents. In the meantime, Clayface fails to control his powers and turns into a monster. He declares that he is now the bad guy that everyone wanted him to be, and he goes into a frenzy while Batman tries to make him realize that this is exactly what the Victim Syndicate wanted and that he can fight through this. In a different part of Gotham, the Bat family tries to figure out where the Victim's march is heading. They finally realize that all the routes eventually lead to Arkham and that the Victim Syndicate must have planned this because they wanted the people to witness something. In the next issue, titled Fall of the Batman Unstoppable, Batman watches from a distance while Clayface talks about how he has never been a good person and that this monster within him has always been his true identity. As the two finally face each other, Clayface traps Batman in one of his limbs and states that he is a bad man who does not care about others. Batman tries to reason with Clayface and tells him this is not true, but Clayface asks him to shut up and tries to attack him again. Eventually, Batman uses a freeze gun to control Clayface, and he then consults with the other officers who tell him that Anarchy and the first victim have managed to escape during the chaos. Mayor Atkins also shows up at Arkham, and Batman finally stands up for Clayface and declares that he will get him all the help he needs, but will not allow them to put Clayface in Arkham. In the meantime, the first victim and Anarchy monitor the Victim March, when the first victim decides to head to the march to witness Batman's downfall as it happens. While Clayface soon freezes and runs away from Arkham, Cass and other members of the Bat family visit Dr. October, who tells them that a cure for his condition will be ready in an hour or two. In the meantime, Batwoman meets her father, who hands her a MacGuffin gun that would kill Clayface. While Batwoman states that Batman would never allow one of his allies to die like this, her father leaves the gun with her and takes his leave. While the rest of the Bat family carries out different missions, Clayface soon appears in front of Batman and the rest of the Bat family, and even declares that he was only using Batman to stay out of Arkham and that he never cared about any of them. However, Cass appears at the scene and insists that this isn't true, which finally brings Clayface to his senses as he returns to his usual human form as Basil. However, this does not last for long, as he becomes a monster again. As the issue comes to an end, Clayface assumes a monstrous avatar while the first victim declares that everything is finally coming together and that the event they waited for is finally happening. In the final issue of the Fall of Batman series, number 973, Clayface wreaks havoc as he turns into a monster and wanders around Gotham while destroying buildings and scaring the citizens. While the Bat family tries to devise a solution for this, the first victim is thrilled to see that the citizens of Gotham are finally seeing what Batman has done to their city. Anarchy opposes the first victim and points out that this is not what they set out to do, and that the citizens of Gotham are now scared of what awaits them. The two end up fighting each other, and Anarchy almost manages to defeat the first victim. On the other side of the city, Batwoman finally breaks the Bat family's no-kill policy and shoots the MacGuffin gun at Clayface in order to kill him. While the issue ends, the entire Bat family is outraged at Clayface's death, while the victim Syndicate also disappears from the picture. However, they appear in the next issue, wherein we learn that Mudface finally accepted Dr. October's offer to cure her condition. The first victim also recruits a new member to work with the victim Syndicate as they devise their next plan to defeat Batman. The twisted members of Victim Syndicate. The first victim was the leader of the Victim Syndicate, which included 4 other members who all believed that their lives were ruined because of Batman. The first victim was supposedly the first innocent person who had been wronged because of Batman, and not much was known about this character's true identity. Even Batman could not recognize the first victim, even though they met on various occasions. The character wore a red and black suit that was made of materials that could not be damaged, and it was also disclosed that the first victim had spent 7 years developing this suit. Besides being a good leader to the Victim Syndicate, the first victim was also skilled in combat and strategic planning. Mudface, also known as Glory Griffin, was a young woman who initially worked as a production assistant on the sets of the film Second Skin. The movie's lead protagonist was none other than Basil Karlo, who ended up getting into an unfortunate accident that turned him into Clayface. When Glory approached Basil after the accident to ensure he was not harming himself, he lost his calm and threw her into the same chemicals that turned him into Clayface. Glory assumed the identity of Mudface and soon joined the Victim Syndicate to seek her revenge and haunt Basil and remind him of his actions. When Basil offers to find her a cure, she turns down his offer and states that she wishes to remain in this form so that everyone can be reminded of what a monster Basil is. Eventually, Glory accepts Dr. October's offer to undo her transformation and again turns into a young lady. Madame Crow was another member of the Victim Syndicate, and she used to be a graduate student who had ended up turning into a guinea pig working for the Scarecrow. Her real name was Abigail O'Shea, and she posed an anti-fear toxin that caused everyone to lose all inhibitions and act fearlessly. In various situations, Madame Crow's anti-fear toxin caused large-scale damage, as people around her started using their weapons and guns without fear after being exposed to it. She also possessed an array of weapons and high-tech gadgets and was skilled in armed combat. Mr. Noxious, also known as Guy Mandrake, was a stockbroker who ended up under the control of the villainous Poison Ivy. After staying under Poison Ivy's spell for 3 months, Mr. Noxious developed the ability to make everyone in the vicinity fall sick by using his mind. He ended up resenting Batman for not doing his duty well and allowing villains like Poison Ivy to exist, and he eventually joined the Victim Syndicate so that he could work against the vigilante. Mute, also known as Virgil Myers, lived a peaceful life in Gotham with his wife until the Joker attacked the city with poisonous gas. The gas had detrimental effects on Virgil and his wife, who ended up losing her life. Virgil survived the incident, but he had to undergo an extreme tracheotomy in order to do so. He ended up losing his voice, but somehow gained the ability to stop people from using their voices whenever he wanted. He also blamed Batman for not protecting Gotham well enough and blamed him for his wife's death. Conclusion. While most of Batman's villains have evil intent, the Victim Syndicate was a breath of fresh air, as it was made up of innocent citizens of Gotham who had ended up as collateral damage of Batman's fights with his enemies. They put up a good fight against the Bat family and were a fierce team of individuals who managed to stir up some troubles in Gotham. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.